Welcome to the Thyroidless Life podcast with me, Dr. Rebecca Warren. This podcast is for you if you're healing after thyroidectomy, or you've been diagnosed with a thyroid disorder, or think you might have a thyroid disorder and want to understand what it looks like to truly get yourself well. Quite frankly, I wanted to share all the information that I wish I knew a decade and a half ago when I was diagnosed with a thyroid issue, had my thyroid cut out, had high dose radiation, and left there feeling worse than before. And that's why I made this podcast, so I can share that information with you, so you can take that information, implement it, and truly get yourself well starting today. Welcome back to the Thyroidless Life podcast. It's Dr. Rebecca Warren here, and I'm so excited to be back. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's a little 2-week hiatus between our last episode, and the reason for that hiatus is the reason behind why I wanted to do today's episode. I was sick, but we're going to go into what that means, right? And I have a special guest today. I'll interview here in just a second, but I wanted to do today's podcast episode because throughout the years when I've coached people, what a lot of them don't understand, like if I have them do a food diary or if they're meeting with me, a lot of times what they'll tell me in their consult is, you know, Dr. Rebecca, like, my food diary is horrible. I've been traveling, or, work has been crazy, or we've been moving. And, you know, there's X, Y, and Z reason for why they weren't able to stick to what their goals were. And usually they don't want to meet, or they want to kind of put it off. And I tell them, I'm like, no, this is actually when I want to work with you. Because what we don't realize is it's in those moments of stress, it's in those moments when we're fighting some things that really define what's going to happen with your health over time, especially when it comes to balancing out your thyroid hormones, your blood sugar, your overall health. And so if you want a long time, like a long life view of what health really looks like, you have to understand that it's in the times of stress, it's in the times where you're not feeling well or you're feeling overwhelmed, that you have to figure out how to be the most successful so that you have lasting effects. Because that cortisol of being stressed out, along with probably lack of sleep, maybe not having right nutrients, usually when we're sick or when we're overwhelmed, we tend to go to choices that are not going to be the greatest for us, are not going to really support healing. And so what I always teach is that in those moments, you got to do the best you can, right? You don't give it all up. You got to do the best you can. And this goes for especially this demographic, right? If you're listening to this, there's probably some type of hormone imbalance, or you assume there might be. Maybe you have your thyroid and it's dysfunctioning, or maybe you had your thyroid removed. What you want to understand is, like, how do I work with my body, right? That's the biggest thing I hate about how modern medicine approaches thyroid care, whether it's thyroid cancer or Graves or Hashimoto's. It's this idea that you're just broken down machine and that you need an outside-in approach, and that's it, right? Like, there's nothing you can do about what's happening to you. Just deal with it. And that's completely false. You have to learn how to, even if you've struggled with health issues, even if you've had a lot of questions and have been frustrated with the medical system and your health care, I don't care what you've been told or what lie you've been told, your body's created to heal itself. It's extraordinary. You're listening to this right now, and your heart's beating, your lungs breathing, you're fighting cancer, you're digesting food, you're making new cells without you having to think about it. And if you want to see overall health, like if you want to be in control of that health, right? You can control a lot of those. There's a small percentage, right? Toxicity, genetics, SNPs, and all these things. But a majority of you can control. You have to start changing your thinking about, how do I work with my body to support my body, make my body stronger, rather than my body's weak, my body's failing, I need all this outside in help. And that's why we're doing today's episode, okay? We're going to be sharing what we do when we're sick so that I can help my long-term thyroid hormone health. And I have a special guest here. Guys, this is my partner in crime. Let me give a little intro to him, right? Exceptional doctor. He serves hundreds and hundreds of people every single week inside our clinic, does virtual health coaching with men and children, both in our clinic and worldwide. I think he is the smartest man ever. No, like, you guys don't understand. You can ask him the most randomest thing, like, hey, I read this article, and he could probably tell you the research article, when it was published, who the doctor was, all of that stuff. And I'm very blessed that I get to practice with him. This is my husband, Dr. Nathan Warren.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I do have to say that it's pretty biased, though.
How is that biased? I practice with you, and you know I'm a realist. Like, no, I'm like real. I'm gonna tell it like it is. Like, I don't tell people like your baby's super cute if the baby's not cute.
Well, hopefully there's no ugly babies out there, right?
There is no. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that why I was excited when you decided to have me on the show was because when we're looking at the immune system and, proper function, this is a conversation I have to have with patients multiple times a day, every week. So that means for the past 8 years, the thousands of patients that we've worked with, this is a conversation I have over and over again. And so I think it really goes back to what you were talking about at the beginning of this podcast episode, is looking at the overall, kind of thought process behind it, right? So when we're looking at this whole idea of being sick, the first thing I have to establish, and this is something that took me years to learn, right? So you may not quite get it at the beginning, and that's why you got to hear this type of information over and over and over again. But it's got to be a complete paradigm shift for you. So a lot of times what we look at as being sick, especially in our society today, is really just, a proper health response. So let me give you an example. Our whole society is so scared of fevers. I mean, we built we built a whole society of just being afraid of having a fever. I mean, if you go into a typical, doctor's office, emergency room, or like a pediatrician, let's say you take your kids in and you talk about them having a fever, what's the first thing they're going to try to do? Like if you go back maybe 50 to 100 years, it was, hey, let's figure out ways that we can support the body through that fever. As opposed to now, it's how can we stop the fever, right? Can we give some acetaminophen? Can we do something that stops the fever? And so we have to understand that, when you come in contact with let's say viral particles or, different bacteria, your body is supposed to adapt to that, right? Well, as we know with anything in life, change and adaptation can sometimes be uncomfortable, but it's necessary. When we look at the immune system, think of it as a muscle system, right? It can get stronger or it can get weaker. And so if we're constantly approaching this idea of every time you have sniffles, snotty nose, throwing up, coughing, all of these different things, if we're looking at that as this constant like, oh, our body's, it's making a mistake or it accidentally got sick, what can I do to stop it? As opposed to realizing, oh man, my body's intelligent. Like it's going to respond the best it possibly can to our outside environment to help it adapt, right? So health, and this is a big one for you guys, health is not just about how you feel and how you look. I used to say health is not about how you feel and how you look, but I've changed that over the years, mainly because of your work with thyroid patients and understanding that, like how you feel and how you look is important to you, right? We don't want to go through life feeling like absolute crap. And sometimes those feelings can clue us into, what's actually going on inside the body, especially with the thyroid. I mean, how many patients and how many times have you talked about on these episodes that, you can have proper blood work and they're like, oh, it's great, but you feel like crap, right? So I've changed the way I've said it. So health is not just about how you look and how you feel. It's about how you function. Health is about adaptation. And so if we don't adapt, right, we're going to have, worse and worse symptoms because that adaptation process isn't happening fast enough, right? And so we know that there's a principle of time. Your body takes time to heal. And so if we're not giving the body the appropriate things that it needs to be able to heal and adapt on a timely manner, that's how we get chronically sick, right? That's how we get chronic disease, or that's how we end up with a much more severe reaction to those things. So it's all about adaptation.
Absolutely. And how you view your immune system affects your thyroid, right? Like, I think it's so interesting to me that when we talk about thyroid disorders, we talk about it as if it's just in the neck. Like, that's the problem is only there. And we're going to get into like the immune system, right? But one thing that's not explained to people that have autoimmune issues, and I'll talk about people that may have had their thyroid removed, but there's a TH1, TH2. This is kind of like your immune system. It's your first line of defense. It's how you go. That's how you fight back bacteria. That's how you fight viruses. That's how you fight pathogens, right? It's this immune system. And when you get diagnosed, just so you guys know, right now it's said that 90% of hypothyroid and hyperthyroid, so up and down, right, too low, too much, is associated with an autoimmune disorder. And that's all you're pretty much told. And you think, oh, okay, so I have an autoimmune disorder when it comes to my thyroid. And it's like, no, you have a whole system disorder. You have an immune system disorder. And I think that's the biggest disfavor that's happening. Again, they make it seem like dealing with a thyroid disorder is so easy because you can medicate it, radiate it, or get it cut out. But that's never addressing the real issue, because a thyroid autoimmune disorder affects your whole body. It's a systemic issue. It's an imbalance between TH1, TH2, your cell-mediated, humoral-mediated immune response. And so if you ignore that because your doctor didn't explain that to you, like, hey, I just had someone say this. They were like, oh my gosh, I don't feel good on my thyroid medication. I have Hashimoto's. And I'm like, okay, this was a question someone submitted online. And I said back to them, I was like, listen, just because you're on thyroid medication, that ain't fixing anything. And what will end up happening is you will live with an autoimmune disorder, and having an autoimmune disorder is like a roller coaster. It is a up and down. Sometimes it'll be fine, like you'll be baseline, and then you crash, and then you go up. And when you're having that active autoimmune attack, you're not going to feel good. You're going to have to tweak those medications over and over again. And how about for people that have thyroid cancer? Your thyroid, I love what you said about adaptation. When your thyroid starts to grow, I have a young girl. Oh my gosh, I want to share this with you guys. I have a young girl right now that I'm coaching, and her thyroid was growing. And she had been coaching kind of off and on with me, and I had to sit down with her, and I said, listen, I think she's in her early 20s, and I said, right now, working with me, what this is telling me, your thyroid is growing, there's nodules there. What that's telling me is that your thyroid is not adapting. Something is wrong where your body is no longer adapting the way that it needs to. So you have a choice. You can run off scared and go, you can have the option to cut it out depending on the doctor that you see, or you can realize there's an imbalance in my body. There's an imbalance within my immune system, and my thyroid isn't adapting. I need to change that. The choice is yours now. Because the problem is when you hear that your thyroid's growing, or you hear that you might possibly have the C word, you get scared, right? Like you are like, I got to get it cut out, right? But if you were told, listen, you're not adapting, and just so you know, I'm doing a whole episode on thyroid cancer and, the possibility of it being something more than just benign, right? But you're not adapting, which means you have to figure out why you're not properly adapting and change that. And she's seeing amazing results. Her thyroid is functioning again. It's shrinking. It's been incredible. And even if you've had your thyroid removed, guys, guess what still remains? The immune system. Guess what still remains? Whatever triggered an imbalance within that immune system. It's still there. Cutting out your thyroid just takes away the loudest symptom of something being wrong, just gets rid of it, and leaves behind what? What caused it there? So why is it that over time, unless it's properly addressed, you can start to develop more health issues? It's because what caused the dysfunction never gets addressed. Only the sick organ, which is a symptom, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a focus on symptoms. And if all you do is focus on the symptoms, you're missing why those symptoms showed up to begin with. And I love how you went there because, again, like you said, when you look at the thyroid and hypothyroidism, how, close to maybe 90% have underlying autoimmune. And again, in our society, we've traded acute infection, right? So acute infection for this whole chronic autoimmune epidemic that we see, right? So just over the last 15 years alone, we've seen a 54% rise in autoimmune rates. That's crazy.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But we have to think about why that is. Like, if we want to fix the problem, we have to reverse engineer it and say, why did this happen to begin with? And so when we look at the majority of acute infection, we know that 90 to 95% of it was either completely fixed or eradicated, or at least like mellowed out by hygienic practices, right? Washing your hands after you go to the bathroom. You remember the guy, the physician that got ripped apart and like his life ruined because he suggested that physicians wash their hands in between births.
No, like when he died, he was ostracized still. And it was after his death that they were like, oh, we should wash our hands. It can save women's lives.
I mean, he perhaps in the medical realm has saved more lives than anybody else because of his, idea that, oh, wait a second, proper hygiene practices are great, right? So we know that hygiene actually plays a much greater role, even though we don't want to admit it, than medicine ever has for acute infection. But then we spent an entire, 3 to 4 generations of kids teaching parents that we need to avoid all acute infection. And so every symptom that shows up, we need to squelch it, right? We need to get rid of it. And so what ends up happening when you do that is you don't properly train that immune response. And then if you're constantly shutting down, like you were talking about TH1, TH2, well, TH1 is your cell mediated, right? That's your initial reaction to, the outside environment, whether it's a bacteria or viral particle. And so if you don't have that initial fever and snotting it out and coughing and all of these symptoms that show up at the beginning, you cannot have a properly trained humoral memory part of the immune system, right? That TH2. So then what do you have? You have generations of kids that are not able to exercise that muscle of cell-mediated reaction, which then turns into an overactive memory part of the immune system. You are now stuck in a humoral part of the immune system, aka autoimmune. And that's where we are right now. And so we've created this in reality, and then you throw on top of it, like you talk about in other episodes, our exposure to, 90,000 plus toxins and chemicals on a yearly basis, the problems with now all of our gut issues. Our ancestors didn't have to deal with glyphosate and damage to a leaky gut and having all those issues. So you throw that, it's a perfect mix for serious autoimmune conditions throughout our society.
Not just autoimmune conditions, though. Cancers as well. Now I'm going to share this. And anytime we did a video on this a few years ago.
I think this actually changed like a major paradigm shift in us and how we practice. Just hearing this.
Yes. So whenever I share this, people are always like, no. And I'm like, yes.
Yes.
So Mel Greaves, because I'm probably
Sir
Mel Greaves. He did get knighted. He's a scientist that was knighted. He's from the UK because he confidently says he knows the cause of leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I was like, hold up. When I saw this article, I was like, for someone to say, I know the cause, this man has devoted 30 plus years, that's why he was knighted, for his work and looking at what's going on with this cancer,
And I
right?
think it's specifically like childhood leukemia, right?
Well, he goes a little bit further.
Oh, nice.
So there's more of an update here, right? So pretty much he talks about it, and it didn't make a lot of sense because what he first started talking about, he's like, we are seeing, he introduced a concept. This is what he's famous for pioneering this concept that cancer progresses and becomes more malignant and drug resistance through a process that has happened through evolution, quote unquote, right? So he pretty much says that there's a lack of historical adaptation.
Well, there you go.
Okay? Let me go ahead and tell you what he's saying here. So from leukemia to overall all cancers, this is what he found. So he studied identical twins with leukemia. He looked at blood samples. He looked at different, from newborn babies. He looked at all this data and he was like, what is changing, within childhood that leukemia is getting worse, right? And just so you know, what he found, or the stats, is that leukemia is getting worse. It's increasing each year only in developed countries.
Right. First world countries.
First world countries, developed countries. And so this is what he found. He gradually built up evidence. So I'm reading some of this from the article here. And he identified a 2-step process, right? The first step involves a genetic mutation that occurs in the fetus that predisposes children to leukemia. Okay, so something in our environment,
AKA toxins, mold.
something environmental, is causing a genetic mutation in the womb. But that's not it, right? He says, but only 1% of those born with this genetic change, only 1% goes on to develop the disease. So hold up, just having this genetic mutation, this predisposition wasn't enough. There's something else that happens to these children that have these genetic changes. What is the second part? He says the second step is a trigger later in childhood by exposure to one or more common infections, but primarily in children who experienced quote unquote clean childhoods in their first year of life without much interaction with other infants or older children, which, with the pandemic and everything. Listen, this is what he's saying.
Yeah.
He's saying that because children are living such a sterile life, they don't have the opportunity to strengthen their immune systems, to teach it how to respond, to create this long-term immunity within their immune system so that when they do eventually get sick later in life, which they weren't supposed to get, their first illness shouldn't be later in life, but when they do, they have a hyperreaction of the immune system because it was never primed.
Right.
And that is literally what he says. And even here, they go on to talk about, let me see, I missed my spot here, but they talked about, additionally, he developed that this whole idea, this insight, that vulnerability to many common cancers, including not just childhood leukemia, but breast cancer and skin cancer, reflects mismatches between our evolutionary historical adaptations and our contemporary lifestyle. There is a break between allowing our body to adapt, to naturally learn how to fight things off, to strengthen itself, and how we live in this kind of sterile world where if we get sick, oh my gosh, like we want to shut everything down. We want to shut down that fever. We want everything to be super clean. When in actuality, like I say this, in actuality, the goal is not to avoid stress.
Right. Stress can make us stronger.
Yes, the goal is not. I have that to say. People, they're like, well, when I retire, when I do this, I'm like, no. The goal is not to avoid getting sick. The goal is not to avoid stress. The goal is to have a body that has an appropriate response to stress, that can learn from it, that can strengthen from it, and respond and go back to balance.
Yes. And when we look at, that overall, adaptation process, balance, I mean, it's got to start with our kids and at home. The difference is this, right? You guys know this. We just spent the last couple of years, people, taking their antibacterial spray and antiviral, spraying down their Mel and spraying down their home. And, I've even seen, even in the past, like, people are spraying every single thing in their home.
Do you remember those pictures of like them spraying like classrooms and you
yeah.
have to walk through sprayers? Like, we have a microbiome that's a part of our immune system inside and outside our body. Like, that was
it's a big deal, right? And that's what I'm saying is that, we've went so overboard on this. Like, there's a difference between cooking chicken on, you're cutting up chicken on your like countertop and things like that, and then, spraying that down with a non-toxic cleaner, to clean it. That's called proper hygiene. Washing your hands after you go to the bathroom, right? That's proper
correct.
hygiene.
Yes. We're not telling you to not wash your hands or keep areas clean. That's not what we're saying.
We're saying there's a balance, right?
Maybe go lick a tree or something.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what we're saying.
And that's part of the reason, like, I know for us, when we chose to put our kids into, a forest school or an education that's amazing, but it's done, outside, and our kids are like, picking up animals and picking flowers and doing art projects out in the woods and like, learning to safely build fires and like building forts, and their hands are in dirt and soil and those type of things, running barefoot a lot of the time, that's building up their immune system. Being around other kids, that's building up their immune system.
But can I also say something too?
Yeah.
Like, y'all need to go back to being kids again. This generation, it's so completely different. But, most of you guys that are listening to this, you grew up like that. Like, oh my gosh, God forbid you go outside barefoot on wet grass. Right? Like, this is what we're saying. Like, your resiliency, your ability to adapt and to become stronger, you have to reconnect with the world around you. You have to expose yourself to things. You need to go outside, go barefoot, like do the same things that like you were just talking about, and help the body encounter more things.
Yeah.
Like, guys, working out is stressful, right? It's stressful.
Yeah.
It releases cortisol. It's not a chill thing. It's a stressful thing. But if I told you like, hey, that's really stressful, avoid it, you'd be like, what? No, like we know this is, it's a good stress. And you have to be able to put yourself in situations to make your body resilient.
Yep. It's hormetic, right? It's hormesis. That's the idea and principle that stress can produce a stronger result. Exercise is one of those. But also too, so is this whole idea of, adapting to bacteria and viral particles, the fever and the snotting it out and the coughing out, those are also adaptations, right? And those are how we train the body over time. Another good example of this that I find is, I'm scared I don't want to go out in the rain. It may make me sick. And it's like, no. Rain is a natural element. Right. And when we look at something like rain as a natural element, we know that, it's not going to hurt us. Right. So why have some people in a few generations thought like, oh, if I go out into the rain and it's cold, I'm going to get sick? Well, it's because you are not adapting appropriately to your environment. And again, health is all about adaptation. If we don't adapt, then we are not a healthy individual. Health equals adaptation, proper adaptation. So that's what we really have to focus on. And that's why I love that you take a big approach on this podcast of looking at, not only thyroid health, but then when you dive into other hormones and adrenals and, our microbiome, and it's all about adaptation. Every single bit of it is about adaptation. And when we get that concept, now we can start to throw fear away, right? Like now, the next time you get a fever, what I hope is you're a little bit more confident, because you're not going to be 100% confident.
You're jumping
right?
into the fever situation, right? We got to explain that a little bit more. So let's go ahead and go into how we view sickness and symptoms, right? What does it mean to have a fever? What is your body doing? And then, guys, like the last part of this show, we're just going to be sharing like supplements like that we use. But I want to go ahead and point this out, right? We have like protocols. Like if you guys haven't checked out like my supplement protocols, I'll put it in the notes section. You can join our practitioner store and you can shop for all these amazing brands and snacks and stuff like that. But what Dr. Nathan and myself do, we create protocols over time from what people have asked us, what we think could be really helpful. But let me go ahead and tell you guys this, right? We have people in our office and people that we coach, or virtual clients and all of that, people in my membership group that do it, right? They switch out their medicine cabinet, and in there they have all these supplements that help them fight things off. And I always love, like, I'll have people send me a message, well, Dr. Rebecca, I'm taking vitamin D and NAC, I'm taking X, Y, and Z and all these things and da-da-da. What should I do? Now, like, what else should I do? And I'm like, let me go ahead and clarify something, first of all. Those supplements aren't healing you, right?
Yes.
Your body is healing itself. Those supplements are coming in and they're addressing a deficiency. They're helping you adapt better because the world is stressful. But in the end, your body is healing itself. Nothing's going to beat sunshine, fresh air, and rest. It's just not. And the people through the years when I'm like, well, guess what? Now you gotta rest. You gotta call out. You gotta slow down. You gotta turn off that phone. You gotta turn off that phone. I'm even bad with that.
We all are.
Yeah, when I was trying to recover this time. But you have to slow down. Like, you have to give your body the ability to work, to conserve energy, because when you slow down, you become stronger, so that next time you encounter it, you're having a better response. It gets better and better and stronger. But nothing is ever, we have amazing supplements. And let me go ahead and tell you guys this. Like, I know some of you guys might listen to something, I heard vitamin D is good, or I took this, or what's the popular one? Elderberry. Like, we love elderberry, right? Mm-hmm. But what we're going to share with you goes way deeper, way deeper in supporting your immune system. Like, these are things that you take a lot of, that you utilize. And of course, none of this is, medical advice. This is just for informational purposes across the board, how these different supplements can be really, really supportive. But make sure to join the link in the notes of this podcast and register so you can have access to this listed out. All right, so let's go ahead and jump right into sickness, symptoms, and fever, and then we'll go into what we do.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so again, when we look at fevers, we have to change our mindset from thinking that this is a mistake or something bad that the body's doing, that it's trying to cause self-harm, right?
Like the fever is the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how we view it.
Yeah, and that's not the case at all. Again, principle number one, your body's not going to create self-harm. Your body does what it needs to do with the best that it possibly can to adapt. So that may mean, again, if you're in a really, really chronic sick state, that, your body may be stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Which means that, those symptoms may be worse, the way that you adapt may be worse, but it's never the body making a mistake. The body doesn't make mistakes. It is way too intricate in all of its cellular function that it doesn't make mistakes. It's like the most advanced adaptation machine that's ever walked this planet. It's unbelievable. And so we have to first realize that the fever is not the body making a mistake. The fever is a proper response to that adaptation process. And what I've learned over time is this, that when we actually look at fevers are also a detoxification process. We know that now, and I've talked to you about this, Dr. Rebecca, before, we know that now, like when you look at water, for example, and how it makes up in the body, we were taught as kids that water is just, liquid, solid, and gas, right? But now we know that there's this fourth phase of water, and it's a gel-like matrix. And that's what it is inside of your cells, or that's what it's supposed to be. And it's very important because that's how we're able to move toxins out and bring nutrients, vitamins, minerals in order to have proper cell function. Well, when you're like, if you remember, or if you've ever done this, if you've ever taken like, let's say collagen and you're trying to make gelatin, right? What's one of the things that you need in order to make that gelatin? It's heat, right? You need that heat in order to do that. So when your body is literally heating up its environment, it is a part of a detoxification process. It is smart. It is important. It is necessary. And so that's why even with the kids in our office, at a young age, most of them don't even tell me that they got sick anymore. They're like, my body had a party, right? Like my body did what it was supposed to do. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah. But change always is. Adaptation always is in anything in life. It's uncomfortable, right? So we have to first recognize that. Fever is not the problem. Fever is not the villain. Fever is the body's natural response to it. And I'll even point this out. I'll go even further because this is where everybody's fear lies. Well, can't my fever kill me? Won't my fever kill me? No, it will not. Your body's inability to adapt, right, may end up killing you, but a fever will not. Fever doesn't kill you.
You have a self-regulatory system. I mean, we have hospitals that are begging parents to understand that fevers, the only thing you need to pay attention to is like your child. And honestly, if I can try to pull it up here while we're talking, but is it the Children's Hospital? Is it Cleveland Children's Hospital?
Philadelphia, maybe?
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
There's a Children's Hospital that made this blog post, and I always share it. Especially with parents that are concerned, but with people that are concerned about fevers, is like you have this self-regulatory system. Your body's going to try to push that fever to whatever level it needs to be to combat if it's a bacterial infection, if it's a viral infection. And the idea is to sustain it there as it fights it off, because these types of infections will not thrive in a heated environment, such as the one that you create when you have a fever. So your body's like, whoa, we're sick. Let's warm this up. Let's get rid of it. And a lot of times where you see the most highest spikes and crashes when it comes to fever is when in our attempt to suppress it. And the body's like, no. I want this back up. And you keep on having to suppress it. And I mean, this is research. Like you can look up in PubMed on how hospitals are trying to figure out how to change and educate families to not be so afraid of them.
For sure.
Even febrile seizures, like seizures that come from fevers, this hospital's like, they're not dangerous. It's the body trying to conserve itself. It's trying to fight off. I want you to see a fever in yourself and in children. Like, I want you to take a step back and be amazed at how incredible your body is, that it knows innately to jump into action and to fight on your behalf. And you've got to figure out how to work with that, right?
For sure.
It's a fever is not something to be afraid of. In fact, we always try to work with fevers and just lay into it. And like, if you got to put a cover on, we put a cover on. And usually what we tend to see in ourselves and in our children is they break through the night, you sweat it out, wake up. And again, this is focused on, everybody's health, but I always think it's really incredible, a child after a fever. It's like their brain is like I don't know, developed.
Yeah.
Like
progressions. Major progressions.
I have a family member who's a practitioner as well, and he would tell me that. He was like, oh my gosh, like you will not believe how much children grow after they go through it, right? And then it happened with our kids. Like they would wake up the next day, they were like, they had developed. They had really, really, grown in that way. But so everything that we're going to recommend is working with your body's natural immune system, working with those fevers, and making sure to help keep things in check, because we're also, listen, you made a really good point. Like, what's going to kill you? It's your body's inability to adapt. We are aware. We've been in practice long enough. We've coached long enough. We are aware that as much as like you try to live a non-toxic life and a super clean life, this world is toxic and stressful. And that's why we have these supplements here, right? We are doctors of chiropractic. And I remember a few years ago, years and years ago, but someone had asked, like, is like chiropractic natural?
Right.
And it's like, well, is it natural? No, it's not.
No.
God didn't create human beings and then say, hey, and here's your chiropractor. No, like chiropractic came about because we're human beings living in a stressful world, and that helps you adapt. So all of these things that we're going to share with you is how to help you adapt.
Yeah. And I love how you said that, but doesn't that make sense with kids? Like if a fever can be a part of a detoxification process, you're always going to get, better from the standpoint of whatever it may be, the way you think, the way you move, the way you heal, if you remove toxins from your body and from your cells. And so, yeah, you do get to see these major progressions, in kids and that type of thing. And really, again, and Dr. Rebecca, you kind of mentioned this, when you look at, the possibility of not being able to regulate the fever appropriately, most of the time that's due to toxins, right? Like exposure to chemicals or, poisoning or any type of chemicals that basically, almost deregulate your hypothalamic function, right? If it affects your brain and it affects the area that's supposed to regulate your temperature appropriately, that's the only time it would be, of negative effect. So once we establish that, now we can have fun with it. Now we can talk about, how can we support our body through that process? How can we work on, removing anything that's interfering with that adaptive process? And that's, if we're going to be honest, that's what your great grandparents did. That's why your great grandmother, when you had a fever, she would put 3 sweaters on you and put 2 blankets on you. They're like, why? Because I'm trying to, support the body through that adaptive phase. So, our ancestors and ancestral wisdom, they knew that.
Absolutely. All right. So let's jump into, it's really funny. Again, I told you guys, I took a break from life. I was surviving with my kids. And I rested a lot, and I allowed my body to do what it needed to do. And it's really funny because when I spoke with Dr. Nathan about doing this episode for you guys on the podcast, I was like, hey, do we want to make a list out of all of our favorite supplements? He's like, I'm just going to grab it out of our cabinet. And so we actually have all the bottles sitting right here in front of us. And I want you guys to understand this. I would rather you stock up on these things instead of waiting around till you're sick and then I get a message online like Dr. Rebecca, or if you end up joining my membership group, oh, what do I do? What we do in our house is we'll stock up on these items. We use a lot of these kind of on a daily basis too, but we'll stock up on it so that when something does happen, we're not rushing around. We have exactly what we need and we can start using it. So which one do you want to start with first?
Well, I think let's kind of start with the big ones that most people know about and they've heard about, but they may either not be taking them appropriately or they may not even know why they're taking those things, right? Because over the last couple years, now there's this huge craze with, things like vitamin D and vitamin C. And zinc and some of those things that now, quercetin's another one that now people have heard a lot about them and they may be taking them, but they may not be taking them appropriately or they may not know why they're taking them, right? And I think that this is super important to go over because I don't get me wrong, I'm super glad people are starting to be aware of it, right? And taking it. I think, it was almost a decade and a half to 2 decades ago that, I started listening to lectures and following some really, really intuitive doctors and researchers on, all this vitamin D deficiency and how it can be creating so many issues. And now what we know is it's even greater than what we once thought. We know that vitamin D is involved in over 2,000, right, genetic expressive processes. And so that basically means we have no idea how much vitamin D, the fat-soluble vitamin, actually affects our health. And a lot of people would even say it's not even necessarily as much of a vitamin as it is more like a hormone inside the body. And in our modern society, Dr. Rebecca and I have had this discussion before, because there's 2 camps here. There's some that say, oh, no, it's your vitamin D. It's not a big deal. You're going to be fine. And then there's another camp that says, you got to take 1 billion IUs of vitamin D every day. And then there's this kind of third camp that says, no, we should never supplement for vitamin D. It should always be from the sun. And if it's not from the sun, then, it could be dangerous or toxic to the human body. And so I kind of take a middle approach to this whole idea. Yes, I recognize that getting vitamin D from the sun is probably our most beneficial way, right? It's our most ancestral way to do it. But again, we live in a modern world, right? The way our bodies interact with nature and our environment is almost completely different than our ancestors. And so now clinically, we run into people that are getting lots of sun, but yet their vitamin D levels are still tanked.
Yeah.
And it's mainly because, between gut issues and liver dysfunction, primarily being caused by, things like metabolic issues, it really affects the way that we absorb our vitamin D, the way that we're able to actually, utilize our vitamin D inside of our body. So that's why we're seeing just this huge amount of people that are getting lots of sun, yet are having very low levels of vitamin D. And we know that low levels of vitamin D, and especially with the thyroid, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it could be a primary cause.
Well, yeah, we have studies that show that they see a connection between that low vitamin D, that vitamin D deficiency, and that Th1, Th2 imbalance within the immune system. And if you don't know your vitamin D levels, that is something that should be regularly tested.
Yep.
Because again, when we first started testing years ago, it was never like this.
No.
I would see people in the upper 30s and I would be like, hey, this isn't optimal. I have never seen more people in the teens,
9,
ever
10, 12, crazy.
So, okay. So this is what we do.
Yeah. So, when you're looking at vitamin D, think of it as how we would get it in nature, right? So you're never going to find a food that has fat-soluble vitamins, for example, vitamin D in it, that doesn't also, that isn't accompanied by other fat-soluble vitamins and certain minerals, right? So vitamin A, D, E, K. So when I'm looking at helping my body to adapt and addressing nutritional deficiencies, I like to get those all together, right? So I know, again, there was this big craze with taking as much vitamin D as we can. And then people said, oh, whoa, hold up, right? A massive amount of supplementation of vitamin D without the vitamin K can be really, really bad for the body. Well, yeah, because in nature, they're found together, So vitamin A, D, E, K, I like to get those together, right? So one of the ones that we take on a regular basis, but especially when we're trying to adapt better, is a vitamin A, D, E, K all together, right? So we use one by Designs for Health, and it's called ADK Eval. And I'll kind of give you a reason why I like to use this one, right? Because there's tons of vitamin Ds on the market, and there's a lot of good ones. And I'm not even saying this one will always be the best or is the best. That's why our store changes all the time. That's why what we're using with patients changes a lot. But the reason why I like this one is because you've got all of those together, but more specifically, I like, the types that are in this. So for example, when we're looking at vitamin E, most of the time people are taking the tocopherol version of vitamin E. When we look at the research, and actually the primary scientist that did the majority of this research is actually on the Designs for Health team. It's pretty amazing. He's world renowned. But he discovered this other form of vitamin E called tocotrienols. And it's actually even more powerful from an anti-inflammatory standpoint. Remember, vitamin E and vitamin C are one of those that if you do have liver issues, or issues with metabolic disease, that means you're not producing enough glutathione, which means glutathione helps you to recycle your vitamin C and vitamin E inside the body. And it's vitally important because those help with, getting rid of what's called oxidative stress that end up damaging your mitochondria and other proper cell function. So this has those tocotrienols in it, and then it's got the proper types of vitamin K. Remember, there's not just one type of vitamin K, right? You got K1, you got K2, so again, it's going to have those in there. And then it's followed by a really good ratio of vitamin A and D, because vitamin A has also been shown deficiencies in vitamin A will increase your risk of more harm from not adapting to viral particles. Specifically, viruses is where it plays a major role. And then the vitamin D is in the ratio of about 5,000 IUs, which I like that a lot because we need a little bit more bang for our buck when we're trying to adapt better. So when we're using this one at home, and again, it's different for everybody. This is not medical advice, but when we're at home, if I'm actively trying to help my body adapt, to whatever virus or bacteria that may be going on, I take higher amounts. I take higher amounts for myself during this time, and that's something that we found super beneficial, anywhere from 10 to sometimes 20, 25,000 IUs of vitamin D. And you would be surprised, guys, when you look on PubMed, there are actually studies on high doses of vitamin D. I remember doing a video, I think it was a Facebook video that we did, where I evaluated, they were specific pediatric studies looking at sepsis, where sepsis is a big deal, right? That's kind of like that end stage, almost everybody dies, right? I think it's like 80+%. It's a really big problem worldwide. And they took these pediatric patients and the groups of pediatric patients that were in sepsis that they gave intravenous vitamin D. And it was like 300,000-400,000 IUs. And I'm definitely not telling you to do that amount because this was in a clinical setting. But they had an over 80% survival rate with no damages afterwards in their organs, and showing how important vitamin D plays in that type of role. So that's why I like to use this one, again, when we're not feeling well, but we also use it on a pretty regular basis.
It's like our one of our maintenance ones. And we know our levels.
Yeah, it's different for me and you.
We know our levels. Yeah, how much I need versus how much he needs.
I store better than you do.
And again, I'm going to put links for this because you're like, well, Dr. Becca, should I get it tested? Yeah, you can go to your doctor. You can ask your doctor to get it tested.
You should.
Or, you should. Or I have a link where you can order the vitamin D test yourself and you can understand your own levels.
Yeah, well, and most medical doctors are only going to test you maybe once a year, maybe not. Life is dynamic. It changes, right? Absolutely. So you should be always, kind of looking for yourself.
Absolutely. So I'll put a link there on testing, testing those types of levels. And also I want to remind you guys, I'll put a link as well in the notes on all of our favorite supplements here.
Yeah. So let's dive into another big one, right?
Well, I wanted to add one more thing because I know we're probably going to touch on this, but I do want to touch on magnesium.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because I think it's a good segue. Because another thing that there's a problem with is like taking vitamin D. You hear something good, you read an article, you go to your nutrition store, you go to Walmart, you go to Target, you're taking vitamin D. You're not absorbing it well, but you're not getting it into the cell. Magnesium, there's a million reasons to utilize magnesium. But magnesium with vitamin D is what's going to shuttle it into the cells so that it can be utilized.
Yeah.
Magnesium in our household, we are never without magnesium.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, it's getting rid of a direct deficiency that's happening every day in your human body. We use more magnesium than our ancestors did by far. It's not even close because we know magnesium closes up what are called calcium-gated ion channels, which you don't have to remember that. But those are opened based on the amount of radiation we're exposed to in today's world, which means you are using your magnesium every single stinking day. So by the time the day's over, more than likely, maybe there's outliers, but more than likely, you're deficient in magnesium. And we know our food levels are not where they used to be before.
Soil depletion, we know there's I think it's up to 30% depletion of minerals in our vegetables, 15% in our meat. So it's not being grown the same.
Basically zero in our water.
And so we're not getting it because of monoagriculture and all of that. And so what we'll go ahead in the protocol that we have on there of supplements that we like, our favorite supplement list like this, we're going to have included our favorite absorbable form of magnesium. And you'll see that on there because not all magnesiums are made the same. There's magnesiums that cross the blood-brain barrier, that go into the cell better, that's better for the gut. And so on that protocol, we'll have our favorite magnesium in there.
Yes, I love that. And now the next one I want to go into, I think, is one that, again, most people are taking. They just may not know the importance of it, and that's vitamin C. There's been countless studies, even though our medical community has never wanted to admit it. There's been countless studies on how vitamin C improves things like, helps the body with histamine reactions and, adrenals and all this stuff. The reason we take vitamin C, and this is my primary reason for taking it, is because of the support of your adrenals. Because when you are trying to adapt, that's a part of your adaptation process, your HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals. Vitamin C is huge. We're one of the only species on the planet, when you look at us compared to animals, that can't produce our own vitamin C, right? Other animals, the majority of other animals, I think there's like 3 or 4 that we're in that category with. Majority of animals, guess what? When they're encountering, whether it's toxins or a stressor or adaptation, in their bodies, quote unquote, getting sick, they produce their own vitamin C. That's why we should mimic that. We should absolutely mimic that. And so that's why vitamin C can be so helpful. And what I found is that doing about 1,000 milligrams to 2,000 milligrams every other hour when like actively trying to, adapt and fight something off, that's where you're going to find the most benefits there. So you're taking higher doses of it throughout the day. And that's really where you're going to see major benefit. And also too, because, there's several forms of vitamin C. If you take a lot of it at once, too much of it at once, you can hit bowel tolerance, and that's kind of uncomfortable. But, you can also utilize that same process by taking, again, 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams every other hour while you're awake. And most of you will not hit bowel tolerance when you do something like that, and you get the benefits of higher doses of that. Now, I also like to balance out my vitamin C. Like we've already talked about, Dr. Rebecca mentioned, magnesium, and she mentioned, some of those kind of, co-factors that go together that help with that absorption. So when I'm taking something like vitamin C, one of the ones that we love and our kids really love it, we use something called BioFizz, C plus BioFizz. And I think you said you'll put a link to these so people can actually see them. Yeah. But one of the reasons I like it is because it has other bioflavonoids that go along with it. All right. And this is important. And some people are starting to pick up on bioflavonoids because they've heard about quercetin, right? Or quercetin, or however you want to pronounce it. But that's a bioflavonoid. These bioflavonoids are amazing at supporting our bodies through this process called apoptosis, right? Where you're getting rid of damaged cells. And that's an important process. The more you take out the trash, right, the healthier you are as an individual. And that's what these bioflavonoids do very, very well. So things like rutin, things like quercetin, hesperidin, these type of bioflavonoids are very, very helpful. And then it's alongside a proper balance of calcium, magnesium, and potassium. Those are all together.
And you're probably hearing this like, whoa, I had no idea. And this is why in a world where the FDA wants to like take control, they want power, like the government wants power over these supplements, right? Yeah. They are not
because they work.
Because they work, yeah. Right? They're not governed by the FDA or any kind of governing body like that. So what we find over and over again throughout the years is these attacks on supplements. I remember a couple years ago, the Attorney General in New York did this like expose, like, look at how crappy these supplements are. They got like random supplements and they tested them to see if they could identify what fillers were in them, if they were telling the truth about what was in them versus what was on the label. And it was actually quite frightening. It was like they found like DNA in the supplements that they couldn't identify. Like the company had used random stuff in the supplements, right? And this is the thing though. So they did this, they released it out and they're like, look, these supplements are so problematic. No. They grabbed supplements from like GNC and like Walgreens, Target,
Walmart,
Walmart,
Publix,
and they grabbed cheap supplements. And so if you buy cheap supplements, you get cheap supplements, right? And so a lot of times you're peeing it out, your body's not processing it. There's unidentified stuff in there. And that's why the same way the quality of your food matters, the quality of your supplements matters. And having practitioner-backed brands are huge. They're really, really important.
Yeah, it's the difference between addressing a deficiency and not, right? It's a really, really big deal. And speaking of like, regulations and stuff, the next one I want to kind of go into, I believe it was like the all amazing Whole Foods that as soon as people started taking this, they like took it off their shelf and, didn't want people to get it, and that's N-acetylcysteine, right? NAC. And I absolutely love utilizing NAC primarily because of its help within the human body, specifically the liver, for glutathione production. And, the more glutathione that you are able to produce and utilize in the human body, again, the healthier you are. Remember, glutathione is your master antioxidant that helps with detoxification processes, cellular processes, and really helps to kind of clean up the body.
And I want to add this.
Yeah.
Because you brought up the glutathione, NAC, huge, huge, huge. Vitamin C, huge. How does this connect back even beyond just the immune system, which is a big supportive thing, but for people that have thyroid issues? Number one, there have been a couple of studies that have found that, and they've been smaller studies, but how cool is this that by taking vitamin C, actually, along with thyroid medication, if you're taking thyroid medication, can increase the absorption and utilization of that thyroid med.
That's amazing.
So taking vitamin C, I take whenever I can remember it.
Mm-hmm.
I take our vitamin C. It's something that you can put in water, so I can make sure that I'm increasing it. And then this NAC, precursor to glutathione, the most potent antioxidant that you can make. Guys, you have a glutathione selenium peroxidase complex. This is what protects your thyroid. Even if you don't have a thyroid, selenium and glutathione is huge, huge, huge antioxidant powerhouse to protect all of your cells, because damaged DNA, damaged cells is what? Cancer. It's sick cells. It's sick organs, right? But if you have your thyroid, this is huge. I utilize NAC, glutathione, selenium at different dosages for different people depending on what's going on with their autoimmune disorder. But even if you don't have a thyroid, utilizing glutathione, this NAC precursor, is really protective for the cell.
No doubt. I love it. And, when you look at NAC, there's so many, countless amount of studies now. Again, go have some fun on PubMed if you want to, of looking at N-acetylcysteine and its effect on the lungs, right? How much it's supported. And why is that? Because glutathione plays a major role in cleaning up the lungs, because that's one of our primary sources of toxicity in the body, right? When we're breathing things in. And so from looking at NAC, and again, it's not a silver bullet. We're not talking about treating anything, but in the medical literature, NAC has been shown to have help with improvements of bronchitis, pneumonia, things like COPD, even things like asthma, even things that is as drastic as cystic fibrosis, have helped to show improvements in those things when you're looking at the utilization of N-acetylcysteine. It's absolutely amazing. It's fantastic. So again, the way that you would take this, or the way that I should say the way I would take it, because we're all different individuals, and this is not medical advice, but I would take about 1,000 to 3,000 milligrams of NAC a day. Especially when my body's fighting something off and trying to adapt and doing that type of thing. And I find that very, very beneficial, to seeing really great improvements and supporting my body's natural healing processes. Now, some of the other things that I really enjoy, that I've seen some really big improvements, in my patients and supporting their bodies. One of them that's actually super simple, and I love it because we don't necessarily use a ton of stuff from this brand, but it's one that I used even 13 years ago when I was trying to get off all my allergy medications and see all my sinus and allergy problems improved. And that's called Immune Balance Sinus. And it's by a company called Garden of Life. And it's fantastic because it includes so much within one, right? So you've got, your vitamin D, you've got your vitamin C in it. It's got things like Saccharomyces boulardii, which is amazing for natural killer cell production, even in the gut. It's really great at helping to adapt your microbiome. So I love Saccharomyces boulardii. And then it's got some different vitamin C blends that are coming from real food, right? Like amela berry, and those type of things, camu, some of those that are naturally super high in vitamin C. It's got some really great herbal immune support, which I like ginger and lemon balm, some of those citrus bioflavonoids, and like Dr. Rebecca mentioned, before, everybody's favorite elderberry, right? It's in there as well. Yeah. And then it's got enzymes in it to help break down mucus and inflammation, which are really, really helpful and great. Things like bromelain and protease and some of those enzymes that really help to break that stuff down. And then one of my favorites, beta 1316 glucans. Now, when we're looking at that, that is all about, again, increasing natural killer cell production. So studies have shown that, again, when you take something like these beta glucans, they really increase our natural killer cell production, which is a part of our body's initial adaptation defense inside of our body. So I really like that one quite a bit.
That one's a tried and true one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's
years,
lasted,
yeah.
through time. So
Yeah.
what I tell my patients, because we live in, Chattanooga, where like, everybody's got allergies and sinus problems. Like they used to call them seasonal. Now it's just all year round type of thing. So I tell them if they want to do like maintenance, they could do 1 or 2 a day. But in an acute one, you may want to do 2 to 3 capsules 2 to 3 times a day. So you're going to increase that, and then once you're through that, then you can go back to a normal dose, or just put it back into your quote unquote medicine cabinet and use it next time that you need it. Another one that I think is really, really cool, and this is really great for kids, adults, and should be a part of our everyday life, right?
And I like that this exists, by the way.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, seriously. Like, this is a way we can get ancestral wisdom, right? And use ancestral wisdom and use things that our ancestors use, but in a modern, convenient, fun way. And that is grass-fed liver. This is a thyroid podcast, so when we're looking at grass-fed liver, it's like nature's multivitamin.
It really is. And let me tell you guys, it is incredible. And up until a couple years ago, this man tried to get me to freaking eat it. I know I've got listeners that you guys are like, oh, Dr. Rebecca, I get this all the time. No, it's great if you make it this way, or if you bread it with almond flour and do. No, I am sorry. I just can't get behind it. I know it's the value, the nutritional value is amazing, but now you get it all like preserved in a capsule.
Yep.
There's no reason why we shouldn't be getting in organ meat. This is how we lived for centuries upon centuries, utilizing all of the animal.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember reading some of Weston A. Price's work and how he talked about like one group of like indigenous people that, that he was visiting. I think it was in Canada, and how like so many people in America and in Canada were dealing with scurvy, right? Dealing with, this issue with vitamin C deficiency. And they're like, well, how in Canada, where it snows all the time and the weather's harsh, like, how do you guys not have scurvy? How do you guys not have any issues with this vitamin C deficiency? And then they found out that when they would kill an animal, whether it was a moose or a deer or something like that, they would take the adrenals and they would cut up the adrenals and give it a little piece, based on their size, to everybody in the village. But, well, adrenals have vitamin C. Remember, we talked about how vitamin C supports the adrenals. So it already has the vitamin C in it from that animal. And so these people are getting an adequate amount of vitamin C, at least enough to avoid, some of these serious issues that other people were getting. So, organ meats were the first choice for our ancestors. Not 99% fat-free chicken breast. That was not their first choice ever because it lacked nutrient density. Grass-fed liver is massively nutrient dense. Again, it's nature's multivitamin. It is going to provide vitamins and minerals that you need in order to be able to help you adapt.
And I want to add too the importance of the liver when it comes to thyroid hormones, right? A majority, and listen, if you guys are like, liver, well, some of the best thyroid meds come from a gland. It comes from a thyroid gland.
Yeah.
It comes from pig. Some of the best over-the-counter thyroid support comes from grass-fed cow glands. Like, this is something, again, that has been utilized within medicine, outside of medicine for so long. But going back to this thing, your immune system is so important for your immune system. Oh, let's go back. Your liver, right?
Yeah.
Did I say that? Your liver. Okay. So with your thyroid hormone, a majority of your thyroid hormone that is made is T4. There is some T3 that's made, but that T4 has to be converted in the liver. And a majority of it's going to be in the liver, some's going to be in the gut. So even if you don't have a thyroid, if you're on any kind of T4 only medication, tyrosine sol, levothyroxine, Synthroid, you're dependent on your body being able to get that medication and convert it. And our liver is bombarded daily. You may have heard that it's a detox organ, but I like to explain it better as this filter, right? That you have to take care of and you have to clear out. And I'm not talking about just like, hey, start drinking celery juice and that's going to help your liver. No, not at all. I'm talking about you really got to support that liver, because the way I like to explain it best is, you know how you put that strainer in your kitchen sink to wash out, as you're doing dishes, and it catches all this stuff. That's what we can see with that liver, with a lot of, carb heavy, lots of sugar diet, with a lot of toxins, medication use, and utilizing something like a glandular. We know that with glandulars, like strengthens like, that utilizing that not only supports that liver, but gives you really good nutrients as well.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the physiology of the liver and how it works, because that is one thing that I'll hear a lot, right? Like I'll hear this argument that, oh, you can't take grass-fed liver because, that is our detoxification mechanism in the body, so it's going to have all those toxins. That's not really how it works. When Dr. Rebecca is talking about like filtering and helping with detoxification, it's because of what it produces. It's because of how it helps with those processes. Now, so when you're consuming this liver, I agree from the fact you shouldn't consume it from an unhealthy animal, right? Like, if it's a sick animal, it's going to make a sick you. So that's why what we use is a grass-fed, grass-finished. I think it comes from like a New Zealand pastures where they have a lot of different, regulations on supporting, their land and the grass and not spraying it with a bunch of junk. So it's not a sick animal. So you're not taking in the toxins, even though the liver is a detoxification organ. It's because, again, it's really helping with supporting your overall liver function. So that's one that I really do like quite a bit. Now, diving into one that we use, again, when we're helping the body to better adapt and kind of fighting through some things, I like using one that encompasses a lot, right? I'm not really a big fan, just like I'm sure you guys aren't either, of just like having to take 75 supplements when you're not feeling well and you've got to make time to do it and those type of things. So I like to kind of get, a lot of bang for my buck. So I use something called Immunotone Plus. All right. So Immunotone Plus. And this one's got a lot of different great herbs in it and things that support our overall immune balance, right? I like to say balance because that's what it's doing. It's going to help support when our body needs to be in that cell-mediated state, and then when it needs to actually, again, create that humoral response. So this is an immune balance. So it's got some of my favorite things in there, like echinacea. It's got something called andrographis. This one is amazing, and most people have never heard of it. It's actually super beneficial for our circulatory system, our heart and cardiac function, but also for the way it helps with balancing our proper immune response. It's got, again, everybody's favorite elderberry in it. It's got some really great astragalus. Astragalus is super amazing, especially with that Th1 cell-mediated response and our natural killer cell production. I really love that one. It's got some green tea extract in it. And when you look at something like green tea extract, we know it helps the body to get rid of damaged parts of its cells, aka autophagy, right? So it helps to enhance that process. And again, the more trash you take out, the better you're going to be able to adapt. And then it's got some of my favorite things like immune mushrooms, not magical mushrooms, but immune mushrooms that really help a lot with supporting our natural immune response, our natural killer cell production, things like shiitake, maitake, things like reishi and cordyceps. Really, really fantastic. It's got lauric acid, or aka monolaurin, which actually has been shown to help break down the fat layer around a virus, which is pretty cool. So breaking down that envelope of the virus and working really well there. And I believe that comes from like a coconut source, which is kind of cool to think about. So coconut oil has some, monolaurin and lauric acid in it. And then, the final thing is one I talked about earlier with beta 1, 3, and 1,6 glucan, which enhances our overall natural killer cell production. So that one's called Immunotome Plus, and it has all those embedded within one. So it makes it really, really easy to take. I think a serving size is like 4 capsules. So when I'm in the active phase of trying to help my body better adapt, I will use usually about 4 capsules twice a day. But again, that's for me personally. So you can kind of determine based on, height, weight, what you respond best to, and that type of thing there. So another really great thing that I like to utilize, for those of you that, may have dealt with things like sore throats, or maybe you're somebody when you do start to adapt to whether it's viral or bacterial, type of imbalance there, maybe you tend to get more throat infections or get things that kind of start in the throat. I have found this is like literally one of my favorite things on the planet, okay? Mainly because of how well it helps my throat adapt. And that is called Megacidin. It's a spray, so it's a throat spray. And so what I like about it is it has some natural killer herbals in it. And I believe this was, a team effort. So you took the biobotanical research, which made like Biocidin, which is amazing products for the gut and immune system and things like that we use in our clinic. And then another company called Microbiome Labs that makes like Megaspore Biotic and all these different things. So they teamed up and they made a throat spray, and it's called Megacidin. So it's got those natural herbal killers that help to, things like olive leaf extract and oregano and some of those that actually help to, kill off infection to rebalance. But then they combine it with spore form probiotics. So actual bacteria that is then able to repopulate the area and take back over a naturally balanced microbiome in the throat, the ear, nose, throat area. So this is when I like to spray on there. And I'm telling you right now, this is so great. If you catch it early and you start to use this, I mean, it works like gangbusters. It's one of my favorite ones to utilize. And it's called Megacidin. And it doesn't, I believe, it's kind of hard to read on here, but I don't think it contains any like alcohol in it, like which kind of, can kind of burn the throat.
Yeah. I mean, that's the worst thing ever is trying like these alternative like throat sprays and like you have to suffer
and they
through
burn
it. But
so
I mean,
bad,
like,
yeah.
our kids take that.
Yep.
It's really good. And that's one thing, I thought was really interesting is like we don't think about where things are coming in and where they go, like these pathogens, right? Even with COVID, I remember, hearing a doctor discuss on how like the path it takes, right? Like and how it ends up in lungs and then the gut. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like the mouth, like the throat, like,
Yep.
And that's kind of how my little under the weather adventure went recently. It started in my throat and it went to my chest. And I was like, well, duh.
Yeah.
But I will admit, I did not start the spray. Dr. Nathan and I are very different. When we start to feel things, I think like I'm always invincible, which remember, getting sick is not, getting sick a lot is a bad thing, but getting sick is not a bad thing. But he, like, as soon as he feels his body is off, he jumps right in. And I'm always like, no, am I really? And then by the time I push myself, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, crap, I should have listened to my body. So when you start to feel those things, when you start to feel like your body's run down, that's when you start doing this stuff.
Yep.
It's really important.
Exactly. And, I know we got to run through some of these, so I'll be kind of quick with the last couple that I think I want to mention. And one of those is reducing our chronic inflammatory state in the body when we're helping the body adapt, right? Wouldn't it make sense that the more chronic inflammation at a cellular level that you are able to kind of quell that inflammation, that the better your body's going to adapt, right? Always. We know chronic inflammation is one of the root causes of most chronic disease that's out there, including the thyroid and having issues with it. So again, just kind of like the one I mentioned before, I like to get bang for my buck. So I don't like to take.
This is a favorite.
Oh man, this is
one.
a
favorite. We had someone literally show their medical doctor, like, you don't understand. And they were like, what is this? Because, like, he was having all this, like, knee issues with severe inflammation and was just moving around, and she couldn't believe it. So he brought it in for her to look at. But it's a really good one.
Yeah, it's a great one that we like to use when helping the body to balance out things like, high C-reactive protein, some of those markers that may show up on the blood work. But it's called inflammatone. And the reason I like it is because what's all in it, right? Some of my favorite things to lower inflammation. So, you've got everybody's favorite that everybody's crazy about, turmeric and curcumin, right?
Turmeric, yep.
So we know that that's got to be in there. Another one, ginger extract, which most people know is highly anti-inflammatory. It has some really, really great benefits at a cellular level. One of my favorite, though, boswellia or frankincense. This was used in biblical times. It's been used, pretty much forever. And it has some amazing anti-chronic inflammation, processes that it helps the body support. So I really like that one. It's got a really good group of enzymes, so proteolytic enzymes that help to break down inflammation. So these enzymes are actively working. That's their primary job. That's why this is one I recommend taking more on an empty stomach, so those enzymes can really do their job the way they should. And I think with these enzymes, the main ones that need to make sure that you really kind of look into it. If you're on something like a anticoagulant or like a blood thinner, you shouldn't take these enzymes, or you should at least consult your medical physician before doing so. But they can be highly beneficial for those who are relatively healthy. Quercetin, right, which we mentioned earlier, and other bioflavonoids are in there, which again are fantastic at taking out the trash, helping with apoptosis and getting rid of damaged cells. And then maybe my all-time favorite, rosemary extract. I absolutely love the herb rosemary.
Yeah,
oh
we're
my
fans of
goodness.
it.
Yeah.
I mean, you love it so much that you have a daughter named Rosemary.
I don't know if I'd necessarily was like, hey, I love this herb. I'm going to name her after
I
it.
didn't know you were that obsessed.
Oh, yeah. I named my daughter after an herb, because I love it so much. But it's amazing. Like rosemary extract, again, in studies has been shown to help the body when getting rid of things like radiation damage. It is highly, highly, antioxidant, helping with oxidative stress. The more oxidative stress that you help with, again, the more efficient our cellular function and our cellular machinery is going to be working. So I love the rosemary extract in there. And then resveratrol, again, another really great, especially in the world of anti-aging is used quite a bit, but resveratrol is great for lowering oxidative stress and, again, helping with our proper function of cellular machinery when your body's trying to adapt appropriately. So we really like utilizing that one a lot. I tell people, again, for myself, I'm using about 2 to 3 capsules in the morning and in the evening before I go to bed when I'm really trying to, again, help my body adapt. And then this is also one I like to do on a regular basis. So I usually take a couple in the morning, no matter what, because most of those things I talked about help with enhancing autophagy during my fasting period of time. So it really works well for that. The last couple I wanted to mention, electrolytes, right? Like getting proper mineral balance. I think that's huge.
And y'all, come on, no more Pedialyte or Ensure.
It matters what's in it,
Yeah, what's in it is what matters. But let me go ahead and tell you, electrolytes, especially when you're fighting something, but electrolytes overall, like a lot of you guys have heard that you have to drink enough water. No, you have to drink enough water with minerals in it.
Exactly.
It's the minerals that's going to saturate your cells, like allow you to be hydrated at a cellular level. So if you're drinking all of these, is it reverse osmosis, a popular one, or
yeah,
where it can deplete all these minerals,
or
distilled water that's depleting all these minerals. You're just putting in all this water, and that's not how we were meant to drink water. We were meant to drink water that has minerals in it. And so electrolytes is essential. Electrolytes, all of those electrolytes like potassium and sodium are essential. Like we get the iodized sodium symporter that moves iodine in and out of the thyroid. You need it for breast tissue protection. You're doing health. Like electrolytes overall are going to be really important. And I know there's a lot of different types of electrolytes out there.
Yeah.
What are some of our favorites that?
Yeah, so some of my favorite, I actually like using the Seeking Health. It's an optimal electrolyte.
And let's be real here, though. What does it taste like? Because I have a favorite. You have a favorite, but I don't know why. I don't know if there's going to be people out there that are going to be like me. And I didn't put two and two together when I started using electrolytes. That like electrolytes is kind of like, salty water. So be aware of that, because if you get a berry electrolyte, you're going to be like, ooh, berry.
Yeah.
Well, it's like berry salt water. So just be aware. We tried one that Dr. Nathan was obsessed with. I'm like, it was like salt water with a little bit of berry.
Oh, yeah.
So just be aware of that. But I like one. I'll share which one I like that you don't love, but you love this one that I'm just kind of like impartial to. So
Yeah, I mean, I think this one's pretty good. Like, I mean, it's like you said, it's not going to taste just like berry juice, but like it's got a little bit of magnesium in it, so I think that makes it kind of bubbly, and carbonated. But the reason I like, this one by Seeking Health, this optimal electrolyte, is because of what they also add into it. So not only do they have the proper balance of electrolytes like magnesium, potassium, sodium, the big ones you think about, but what I also like about it is it has some really great things to help support your mitochondria. So it has D-ribose in it, which is like fuel for your mitochondria, and it has taurine in it, which is like fuel for your mitochondria. And so a little bit of creatine as well, which can be really, really amazing with proper cellular function, mitochondrial function, and really supporting your circulatory system as well. Now, I'm not talking about, the fake creatine that bodybuilders take, 20 grams of it a day. It's just a small amount, but it really, really helps a lot with proper cellular function. So I like that one. I think that one's really good. We've even done Ultima, which is really good.
Ultima's a good one. I like Ultima, especially if you have kids that play sports.
Yeah, it's great.
My kids had a field day, and I was in charge of bringing like Gatorade packets, and I was like, I'm going to bring some Ultima, and I'm not going to tell anyone. And after they drank like a whole jug of it, I actually had teachers come up to me and ask, like, is this okay? Does this have artificial like sweeteners or any kind of artificial colors or anything like that? And I was like, no, this is what it is. And all the parents were shocked. They were like, wanted me to get the bottle. I had thrown it in the trash, and they took pictures of it. So Ultima's a really good one as a sports drink. Coconut water is a really good natural source.
Just make sure they don't add sugar, because they do that nowadays, man.
I don't know why.
Crazy.
Like, coconut water is sweet on its own.
Yeah.
But I do like the adrenal cocktail. Now, I know how you feel about it. But let me tell you why
I love the idea of the adrenal cocktail. Yeah.
So the adrenal cocktail, and this is kind of like a little biohack that I use. There's an adrenal cocktail that you can make yourself, which is like orange juice. I'm having a brain fart right now.
It's like cream of tartar.
And
then sodium, salt. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So orange juice, cream of tartar, and salt.
It's a crap ton of sugar.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I had a brain fart, because I don't actually utilize the orange juice as much, because I always want to work on making sure that, when people are kind of going into a healing state, that they're not really recruiting their insulin unnecessarily. I don't have anything against orange juice, especially if it's good, freshly squeezed, as organic as possible as you can get. But usually I have people drink an adrenal cocktail like 2 to 3 times a day. So that would be a lot of orange juice.
And most of the orange juices are pasteurized, and they kill all the good stuff. Yeah. It's just,
So I utilize something called adrenal cocktail, and it has a bioavailable form of vitamin C that's really, really good replenishing for the cells. But let me take a step back. Why do you do the adrenal cocktail? Because it's replenishing these nutrients all together, not just at a cellular level because of those minerals, but for your adrenals.
Yep.
So a lot of people that have either gone hypo or hyper, or have had their thyroid removed, the adrenals have had to work overtime to help with adaptation. And by doing the adrenal cocktail, especially multiple times a day, we kind of flush and replenish those adrenals and the immune system as well. So in this one, they have potassium, they have the vitamin C, bioavailable vitamin C, and then they include Redmond's, which is a great source of salt.
It's our favorite.
Yeah, it is our favorite, exactly. And it's going to be one of the safest forms because
they test. Yeah, that's why I love it.
They test for it, yes, because there's all this like controversy, like, oh, they had all this, and they're like, no, 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 no. We're very proud of what we make, and like the toxicity content and the heavy metal content. But what's really also unique about Redmond salt, and you can get this like anywhere pretty much, is that it's coming from ancient seas underground out of Utah.
Yeah.
So it's not like our current sea that's, oh my gosh, how much issues we're hearing now with toxicity and oil spills and just all this destroying the ocean. And then now there's this controversy of how like Himalayan pink salt is being harvested and mined, which makes sense when companies are trying to make money. Yeah. So utilizing something from like ancient sea sources is a really good, safe way to get good amount of sodium that has a complex, because table salt sucks. Like it's depleted and it's bleached.
It's like 85, 90% sodium chloride, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're supposed to have a balance.
Yeah. So exactly. And so that's why we like Redmonds. And so in this adrenal complex, it has this really rich sodium source, has other minerals in it. You get that potassium that's really replenishing for the thyroid, and you get vitamin C. So I like that one kind of like as a triple whammy. But I will include that in the list as well.
Yeah. And I kind of make my own adrenal cocktails the same way because it feels so stinking amazing.
It does feel good.
Like it feels good. Like my body, almost within 10 minutes of doing some type of adrenal cocktail, like I feel like $1,000,000, man. It's crazy. Like I'll kind of do I'll do like our BioFizz, and then I'll mix in the Quinton that I use, the seawater, like, nice balance. It's like nature's balance of electrolytes. And man, dude, that stuff tastes so good, and it's amazing.
And I will say, there are studies though, if you do live by the ocean,
oh yeah,
your mineral content,
even when you breathe,
and just being around it,
it's crazy.
Increases that a lot. So that's something to take into consideration. So if you're living by the beach, don't feel like you have to run out and take like all these minerals.
Yeah.
But that's something to take into consideration.
Yeah. And I was gonna say too, I think one of the things you can do if you want is we can put like maybe some links or a list of some of our favorite, like, helps with coughs, like supporting coughs, because we get that question all the time, like wild cherry bark and plantain leaf and mullein leaf, some of my favorite ones. So maybe we can put those in there without like spending 30 minutes on talking about it, because I know people want to know that, and even some nasal sprays that can, help kind of clean some things out. So we can put those on there too.
That's why it always like irks me, like when I see people say like, oh no, I tried like supplements, like I took some zinc and I took some vitamin C, and I'm just like, that's just like basic, right? Like there's so much more that you can do that's more supportive and deeper, that really doesn't just kind of scratch the surface. Like that's what I always hear though. Like I had someone that was like, oh yeah, no, I did gut stuff, and they just took like one strand of probiotic, or, oh no, I try to do, I try to change my nutrition to help my thyroid, and all they did was get rid of gluten, right? When there's so much more. And that's why we do these episodes. Like I told you guys, like this podcast is meant to be like, I want to share the research with you. I want to have more interviews. I have some great interviews lined up. This is a great one here with my expert. But some other people within the health community, they're really doing a lot of amazing things that have information that can really transform your health. But I also want to share with you like our personal journey, my personal journey, and what it looks like. Because remember, health isn't just getting yourself to a certain point and you're all of a sudden better, right? Like that's it. No, health is that as you age, you continue to get better. So 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, you look better, you feel better, you function better than you did today.
I love it. That's my goal, right? I mean, my health is for my kids. It's for you. It's for my family. It's for my patients. I think when you make health much bigger than just you, not that you're not important, you're very important as well, but when you make health much bigger than that, it's so much easier to be able to make those choices every day that leads you down that path to being a healthier individual, to getting to a point where, again, you're not a statistic and you're living your life the way that God designed you to live. And that's what I think is amazing. And I hope that you guys take from this the idea that we're not taking these supplements to get rid of a symptom. We're using these to support our body's natural healing processes because it is intelligent. It is designed absolutely amazing. It is smart, right? And our goal is to help support that adaptation process in which our body's able to heal and self-function.
Absolutely. And so, guys, that's the wrap up of today's episode. There isn't going to be an outro, so I'm going to ask a few things from you guys. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review, leave a comment. By leaving a review, it allows me to share this message with more and more people. And I love to hear from people that listen and how this has helped you. I get messages on my website, and I love that. But I would love it if you can leave a review. Make sure to check out the notes. And, of course, I always get asked, what are the next steps? How do I work with you? I have a Thyroid Inner Circle membership that the whole focus is to walk alongside you in a group setting with like-minded women on what it looks like to take back our hormone health, to get better over time, and to equip you with exactly what you need to know. So you can check out the Thyroid Inner Circle membership by going to thethyroidinnercircle.com, thethyroidinnercircle.com, and we'll see you next time.